everybody. How's everybody doing this evening? We're going to let our cameras spool up here, but we are beyond excited to bring you this tonight. I'm your host, Nate Zelinsky. Welcome to the Colorado Parks and Wildlife Big Game Hunting Series. Tonight's topic is all about getting started as a hunter and really going through the process of the entire gamut of hunting big game here in Colorado. Obviously, as a state, there's so much opportunity to the big game hunter. Everything from the very popular, elk and deer, bear, pronghorn, even up to the other species of moose, goat, sheep. And all those opportunities exist to you, the hunters, right here in Colorado. So tonight's process is all about getting started. So whether you are a brand new hunter or somebody that's been hunting Colorado for a decade, hopefully we're going to have a lot of tips for you. And this series is all about a process. So we're starting now. I know that a lot of hunters receive this in the mail. This is your application book for your big game draw. This is literally the starting point of that. Whether you're going to apply for a tag or not, the information that you gain in this is huge. It has so much of the information that you need as a big game hunter in Colorado. So as this came out, we wanted to kick off this big game content series with a live feed. It's all about you, the hunter here in Colorado. So as you have questions on anything, tonight is the night to bring those questions. We're going to answer them live, and really we want to introduce this as a series. Over the next several months, and honestly taking you all the way to fall, we're going to have this, whether it's edited content or the live feeds. It's going to be a step-by-step process to help you achieve your goals and achieve success as a big game hunter here in Colorado. So literally, you're going to be able to follow along, and some of these feeds are literally going to be a situation of saying, hey, right now, this week, these are the things that you need to do to prepare for your hunt. You need to scout. You need to prepare your gear. You need to shoot. You need to train. All of those type things. It's going to be a step-by-step process. We're going to hold your hand and walk you through it, again, to achieve success. The main topic that we want to start off with tonight is about setting and achieving goals. Now, so many of us hunters, especially for those who have hunted, some of us have had success and some of us has not. And again, we can gauge success in so many ways. I mean, success, as we've talked about, can be literally just the time that you spent with family, loved ones, enjoying and passing on the heritage of hunting. And that's a successful outing. It could be achievement of having a successful harvest. And that's another level of success in achieving those goals. But we're going to talk about those goals, what they are for you, and how to achieve those with hunting here in Colorado. So that's the mainstay of tonight's thing, is setting those goals and really understanding how to take the next step in fulfilling those, and everything comes with a plan. I know that some of us and our big game, necessarily results have been a little bit more on the luck side, and we're going to hopefully kind of leave the luck. We don't want to just randomly run into things. We don't want to have to get lucky. We want to rely on a plan, on education, on scouting to achieve success. We want to, again, kind of put it more in our favor, put the odds in our deck, and really have a safe, fun, and successful outing every time we go out in the woods. So that's kind of the goal, is to walk you through that process of how to achieve that. So number one, set goals. Now, like we said, goals can be looked at and achieved in so many ways, but you have to ask yourself realistically right now, what are your goals for the upcoming 2021 big game season? Is it about trying to hunt and harvest a new animal? If you've only been a deer hunter, are you going to try to step it into hunting elk? Is that a goal? Is the goal a harvest? Again, whether it's a male or a female animal, is your goal a harvest of those species? And that's a goal we need to talk about and look at. Other type goals is situations of being a realistic hunter, and that's really what I want to talk about. Why set these goals? What is physically able? I know as we look at some of these hunts, we want to really break it down to your individual needs and look at what is possible for you. Is it a situation of, I want to go on the most extreme backcountry, wilderness area hunt. I don't want to see another hunter. And how are we going to achieve those goals? Is it a situation of, I am not in the physical condition to be able to go very far? Or when I create success and have a harvest, how do I break that in down and get it out by myself? So we want to look at that, because that's going to be a part of our goals. We're going to make realistic goals that we can absolutely take step by step, build a plan, and achieve those goals over the next several months and leading up into that hunting season. So we're going to kind of start breaking things down right now and through that process. But again, this is all about you. So you, the hunter here in Colorado, so bring your questions. Comment on here. I know we're on our Instagram page as well as our Facebook page. We're monitoring the comments, and some of those comments we're going to talk about right now. So again, you have questions, make sure you bring those questions right now. Throw them in the comments. Also, if you have some friends out there that are like, hey, they need to hear this, hit that share button right now. Share it. Tag your friends. Send it in Messenger. Bring everybody into this conversation. Again, this is all about you, the hunter here. We're going to break down hunting big game in Colorado, and we're excited to do it. Again, it's going to be a major process. So as we go forth with this, make sure you like those notifications. Again, we're going to make it all real time. You want to follow along. But as we set goals, one of the first things we talk about this time of year is understanding what kind of tag or tags or licensing you're actually going to look for this coming fall. So in the process of the Colorado licensing for big game, the very first step starts with a hunter's education. So you want to make sure that you get your hunter's ed certificate. Obviously, a lot of you are hunters that are following this. You might have it. If you don't, it is an online process right now. It is as streamlined and easy as it's ever been. So make sure that, again, if you're planning on hunting big game this year, if you're new to it, make sure you get that hunter's ed. We have a lot of stuff online for that. We can drop some links in the comments right now. But make sure you sign up and get that hunter's ed. That's your first step. Number two is obviously obtaining a license. Your very first phase of that is the first application. So right now, coming up in early April is going to be your deadline for the first wave, your main draw process of applying for a limited license here in Colorado. So your first step is this. Now after this, we have a secondary draw. So we have another draw that comes out after this first one that has another option of obtaining very limited licenses. Then your third step is going to be in August when what we call the leftover list comes out. So licensing that was not, taken or obtained in the first two draws is going to come out with those licenses coming up in August. And then from that point on, we go to our basically what we call an over-the-counter license that's going to keep going from that point on. So there's a lot of options for obtaining licensing coming up. But the very first wave is this right here. Now, when it comes to this, so many of us are asking, where do I apply for a tag? What animal should I hunt? It's going to break down to your individual needs and what you're looking for. There's a lot of big game species to hunt here in Colorado. You have to ask yourself, hey, am I going to just focus on one species? Am I just going to hunt deer, or just going to hunt elk? Or I'm going to put in for combinations and hunt multiples? That's going to be one of those things. If you have specific questions on that, ask it. We can definitely break it down and give you some opinions on how to achieve success. A lot of times, I always say put a major focus, on one or two, or try to separate them up. Divide a little bit of time to one species, and then divide, other time to another species. Again, we're trying to avoid just the luck of running into them. So let's make a plan for all the species that you want to hunt. That's going to help you create that success. But it all starts off with selecting that game management unit. Now, realistically, I would love to say with a show of hands, you can do it, a thumbs up there, but how many of you are number one, have a plan for this upcoming hunt, and how many of you are going to go back to the spot that you've been hunting? And have you been successful in that spot? As I talk to big game hunters here in Colorado, a lot of us are looking at stats, and we're looking at options. We're trying to really weigh in on what's going to create success for us. And on the other side of kind of the podium there, we have a lot of hunters that say, hey, my granddad hunted this spot, my dad hunted it, I'm hunting it, I'm going to pass it on to my kids. We're only successful every 10 years, but it's tradition. We don't know how to break that. And again, if that's your goal, is to carry on that heritage, continue to do so. But a lot of us might not have had the success that we want, and we're asking ourselves, how do I go to a new area? What are my goals? What should I do? How do I make a plan? And obviously you open this up, and there's a lot of areas to choose from, a lot of areas in the state. So I want to walk you through real quick how I kind of break things down. Number one of the coolest pieces of information out there right now is this book right here. It's the Colorado Outdoors Magazine, but this is the annual preference point issue. This right here is gold. So this right here, this document, is going to have a lot of information on what it generally takes to draw a tag here in Colorado. So I know that as a lot of us apply, sometimes we look at these units and say, hey, do I have a chance? And we always hear rumors. Oh, my buddy had this many points and he put in for a tag and he didn't get it. He put in for license, he didn't get it. I thought he was going to get it. When you put in for an elk tag, a deer tag, a pronghorn tag, they're not going to be a situation of like a moose goat or a sheep tag where there's a little bit more involved. These go by weighted points. So literally, you, by reading this magazine, you're going to have a very good idea of what tags you will draw and obtain and which ones you will not draw and obtain. So no longer, I think, should hunters really go into this draw process and say, man, I have no idea if I'm going to get it, I'm hoping. And when you get those results back in May and June, I don't want anybody to be crushed and heartbroken and be like, man, I had this whole plan and I didn't get it. By reading this and looking at the points, seeing what it takes, you should start to have a good idea of what you're going to get and not get. So I always start off by grabbing this magazine. You can go online, purchase it. It's very inexpensive. I think it's like $3. Get this mailed to you, and now you have a great idea of what it's going to take point-wise to draw these tags. So as I start looking through the map, I'll take a highlighter, and I'll literally look at my GMUs in the back of this book, and I'll literally take a highlighter, and I'll mark which ones I might have an option for. Hey, I have some points. Here's my options. Hey, I don't have any preference points. Here's where I'm looking at, or I'm looking at an over-the-counter option. So, number one, realistically, because that's what it's all about, realistically set your goals of what's even an option for you as a hunter. Once we kind of break down the preference points, we break down what options of game management units we have as an option to hunt, I then start taking it one step further. So, with those realistic goals, how many of you are saying, hey, I've been to areas where I'm hunting off a main road, I'm near a town, and I run into other hunters, and I don't want to do that anymore. If that's a situation to where, hey, I want to be remote, I want to go where other hunters aren't, you're going to start looking at the options of saying, hey, I'm going to look at mapping software, I'm going to look at where there's roads, I'm going to find more remote country to where I'm alone. I don't see other hunters. And right now we can do that. We can look at our goals, we can set up plans, and we can try to seek out areas where we're going to be more remote. So we have a question right here.
Yeah, I have a great question from Travis. He's wondering, what's more important, draw odds or harvest info?
Ooh, that's a great question. So, Travis, with that, what's better odds as far as you're looking at the harvest information or just obtaining the tag? I'm actually going to talk about that here in just a second when I talk about scouting. So when it comes down to scouting, we're going to break that exact question down. So just stay put and hang on just 1 second with that. So we love that question. So as we're looking at all our options there, if you look for a more remote area, set those goals now, find those areas, and you're going to achieve that of being remote and being away from all those hunters. Also look at what the physical conditions are. I can't tell you how many times where I see hunters put in for tags where there's very limited access. There's no roads, no trails. It is, wilderness area. It is rough country, and a lot of these hunters can't physically hunt that country, so they're forced to hunt in a very popular area. There's 2 or 3 access points, and they're forced to hunt in those couple access points. Obviously, you're going to have other hunters, and it can make it rough. So in this goal process, you're asking yourself, what do I want out of a hunt? Do I want to be remote? Do I want to have access? Is my physical ability going to limit me to certain access points? So have those realistic goals in your mind right now when you're selecting that unit and know what you can deal with. If you can't deal with, again, extreme physical, look for those units that offer that more mellow country. There's a lot of them. I mean, our opportunity as a big game hunter here in Colorado, we have so much country to hunt and so many units, game management units that are available even over the counter with no points. You can find mellow country and you can find the roughest, toughest country you could ever imagine. So just know that options are out there. So build those realistic goals and start to make a plan of, hey, I know I'm not as young as I used to be. I know I'm not as physical as I used to be. Let's find those areas and build the perfect hunt for me. And then, hey, I'm ready to go. I can hunt that rough country. I'm gonna build a plan to hunt that rough country. Do that now. Those are key features in setting those goals. Don't wait until a week before the season and realize that what you're up against and having a hard time with that. So that's a part of those goals. Now, the one thing that I'm gonna tell you right now with the game management, How many? I want a thumbs up. So right now on the comments, give me the thumbs up. How many of you in the last 5 years have complained that it's too hot, right? We've all done it. Man, this is awful. It's too hot. The bulls aren't breeding. They're only nocturnal. The deer, the bear, whatever. How many of us have ever complained that it's too warm or the weather is not in our favor, right? We've all done it. We don't ever want to say that we're bad hunters. We don't want to say that we weren't successful. We all want to have some sort of excuse for why we're not successful. So the reason we always come up with that, we always blame the weather. That's the instant out. The weather's terrible. It's too hot. The animals aren't moving. That's why I'm not successful. But when I look at a unit, so you say, hey, right now, Nate, you have no preference points, go build a hunt. You know, if I'm an archery hunter, a muzzleloader, a first rifle, second rifle, I'm hunting somewhat of the earlier tags, we'll call it that. You know, I'm hunting August, September, October, you know, for pronghorn or whatever the hunts are. I'm hunting earlier in the season. When I'm hunting earlier in the season like that, when I select a unit, I look for a particular unit that has a lot of elevation change. Now, there is a lot. Again, I'm a huge fan of a highlighter. Grab this book. Look things up. Look at what units are. Say, hey, again, of this map right here, I can hunt half of these units. Within that, let's look at which ones have a lot of elevation gain. When I say that, I love to look at a game management unit that has low elevation, 7,000, 8,000 foot in elevation, but also has that big high country tree line that goes up to that 12,000, 13,000 feet. If you can find a game management unit that has elevation change, you can always put yourself in the right conditions. So again, when I look at game management units, I look for these big, massive elevation changes, because then I know if all of a sudden I have hot temps, it's that dry year, temperatures are soaring, I can go up in elevation and I can find the temperatures, the weather, the snow, the rain that I want. So when I select a game management unit, I look for that availability of a lot of change in elevation. So again, it's hot and dry, go to that high country. You're not hunting that lower land that you can't get up into that weather with. I promise you, if you have options of high elevation, that high country, all the hunting seasons in Colorado are in a time frame where you will find cold. You will find the temperatures that you want in that high country. Again, you might have to be physically able to hunt that, but regardless, you're not going to have that excuse of saying, hey, the weather wasn't right. So when I look at a game management unit, if I'm looking for a new unit, for all those hunters that are like, where do I start? That's one of the big steps that I look at, and there's a lot of options. Everything from literally over-the-counter up to some of the higher point units, you can find those massive elevation swinging units to where you're going to find the climate you want. Then all of a sudden, let's say it's that first rifle, second rifle, and I get dumped on with snow. How many of us have been in the high country where we're like, it snowed a bunch and the animals left? If you find that unit with that elevation change, now you can say, hey, it snowed, let's go to the lower portions of the elevation in that unit, and we're going to find our animals, we're going to find success. So, setting goals. Number one, set those goals realistically. What do you want out of a hunt? Is it heritage? Is it, you know, success of a harvest? Is it success of just meat, or do you want one of those animals that you could take home and have, you know, a memory of a lifetime, you know, out of a rug or you know, something on the wall? It's all about that goal for you. So set those goals, and we start looking at how to achieve it. What's available to me with my preference points? Then, hey, I have points, I don't have points. Let's look at elevation change. Let's look at the ideal unit for me. Very remote. I want a lot of accessibility. I want a unit that I can drive my ATV in. There's everything. Again, Colorado Parks and Wildlife has done an amazing job of having so many different options and units. You can find the perfect unit for you to fit your needs. Once you fit those needs, we just kind of keep pecking at the process that we're going to talk about. It's going to walk you through it. Now, do we have any questions on that stuff?
Yeah, great question about, okay, once you've chosen the unit, how do you choose what species you should go after, especially as a first-time hunter?
Absolutely. So as a first-time hunter, wondering what species to target first, honestly, as a first-time hunter, I'm a big fan of obtaining, you know, quite a few licenses. It's great with the option of A tags and B tags. So for somebody that's new to that, in this book, next to your application, when you put in for next to your hunt code, it'll have an A or a B or even a C. You're allowed one A tag, one B tag, or two B tags instead of an A. We're going to walk you through that process a little bit later, and actually on March 11th, which we'll talk about here in a second. But either way, you're going to have options of these tags. For me personally, I love to separate my hunts. So even as a very avid hunter, I mean, I absolutely live to hunt. And with that, I have a hard time taking a deer tag and an elk tag in the same week and trying to hunt both. More so because I'm starting to rely on luck. If you're going to look for two animals in the same couple days, you're just kind of hoping to run into one. And a lot of times by not focusing, sometimes you can get distracted and you're not going to achieve that success. So me personally, even if I have two tags during muzzleloader or two tags during a specific rifle hunt, a lot of times I'm going to break my focus. Mornings, I'm only hunting deer. Afternoons, I'm hunting elk or vice versa. But I always pick one thing to focus on. Even if it's just for the morning or for the day, I really try to focus on one species, per hunt. Again, that hunt could be per the morning, per the day, per the week, or for the season. But I always try to pick one first. When I am coming down to the situation of, hey, what's the one thing as a new hunter, what should I look for? I'm really going to look at that unit. So now is when you might look like the question we had as far as harvest information, to where you're like, hey, if I'm going to hunt this particular unit, so it's unit 5, unit 15, whatever the unit you're talking about, what's my availability? Is there more deer? Is there more elk? Is it, what's my bull-cow ratio? What's my buck-to-doe ratio? What are my odds in that particular area of creating success? Now, generally speaking, if I came to me and we're sitting down drinking coffee together and you said, hey, Nate, I'm a first-time hunter, what should I target? I think a doe mule deer is probably the ultimate on a first-time hunter's basis. Reasons why. Number one, our deer population is doing really well here in Colorado, so there's a lot of those availability of that animal out, in the field. There's also quite a bit of availability for tags for that species. So your licensing is in your favor, the number of species and population is in your favor. The other big thing about it, they're a great tasting animal. So obviously most of us are looking for table fare. A mule deer doe is very mild. It's going to be a great tasting, harvested animal. So awesome for all of those aspects. And the other thing that's kind of a big thing, especially first-time hunters, when you actually harvest that animal and it's on the ground, when you walk up to it, it's very manageable. I can't tell you how many times where I've been with first-time hunters that have a successful harvest on an elk and they walk up and they're like, what do I do? It's huge. I've been taught to drag everything out. I can't even roll this animal over for a photo. How do I deal with it? You have to learn to break it down. You have to have a plan. And sometimes when it's hot out, you have to have that plan and execute it very quickly. So that smaller deer species, that mule deer, it's going to give you options of everything. Great eating, availability of tags, a lot of animals in the field, and once you harvest it, it is manageable, especially even by yourself or with other new hunters. It's going to be one of those species that you can deal with by yourself, getting it out of the field and really just processing that animal. So that's probably my number one species, but again, you can break it down to unit and what your best odds are.
I've got two great questions. First, do you have an opinion on if CWD should be a factor in your decision making for which unit to hunt?
When it comes to CWD, I think that most of the units, some of the units obviously are vulnerable to it, and it's very much clear when you're purchasing and applying for that license if that's one of those units. And then the other factor is, I would say, if you are in an area where they're worried about it, Colorado Parks and Wildlife does a great job of managing that. I know that myself this year, I hunted in a CWD unit. It was a mandatory check, and they did a lot. Literally, almost every day they had a checkpoint in the field, so I didn't have to go to a region office to get it checked. There was availability in the field to get it checked. So honestly, it does not become a factor for me. In regards to the CWD, if it's one of those options that it's a worry about it being in the unit, I think that there's enough influence and education out there to where checking an animal in, getting it checked, worried about it and processing that is very simple. So it's not a hassle in those regards. And that's probably the biggest thing that I'd be worried about. More so than worried about the actual animal itself. The past was more the fear of, how do I deal with it? How do I get it checked? Do I have to drive down to a headquarters? How long does it take? Now that is such a streamlined process. It does not influence me either way in those areas. In a very small little background factor, I would say that if CWD is present, it is usually because there's a lot of deer in the area. So I don't want to tell you to go crowd those areas, but CWD in an area would be a sign of a high populated area of deer. So that might be a little tip to keep in mind. It would not be something that I would necessarily avoid. We'll put it that way. So that should help out.
Another great question is how or where do they find GMUs that are draw versus over the counter?
Absolutely. So this book right here, you can go to so many factors. I mean, they mail them out from Colorado Parks and Wildlife, but anywhere that is going to sell big game hunting licenses. So any of your major retailers, any retailer that's going to sell sporting goods of any kind. I mean, half the time, a lot of your grocery stores are going to carry this. So again, anywhere that sells licenses is going to have this book available. Literally, you flip it to the back, and everything is highlighted. So right here, this is over-the-counter antlerless elk. So this is going to be a cow elk, and it's highlighted which area that's available. Right here, over-the-counter, this is antlered or either sex archery. Everything is highlighted. So this book right here literally has every unit highlighted as far as the availability of over-the-counter versus draw. And then once you understand, hey, this is a draw, how much does it take? You flip over to this simple book, and inside here it's going to tell you how many points more than likely it's going to take to draw that tag. So that's another huge influx. So between these two pieces of paper, again, readily available to everybody. This is available at any licensed agent. Physically go grab it. It's fantastic. This one here, jump online, set it up, and we can get that mailed to you right away. And again, it's going to have everything on there. So between those two documents, you literally can plan your hunt flawlessly for what's coming up ahead. And again, it's very streamlined, over-the-counter, limited, antlerless, and kind of how everything's broken down. It used to be one map. It's a pile of maps now, so it's broken down per species. Very, very simple and streamlined. And again, once you grab those books, you'll see it very easily. Any other questions before we jump on?
Yeah, can you explain how an apprentice hunter certificate works?
That's going to be one that we're going to have to jump into a little deeper. I understand how it works. I'm going to say I don't want to say anything wrong on camera here. I'm going to throw a link on that comment. So I got this comment right now. I'm going to throw a link to the website and we can walk it all through it. Again, I've actually been an apprentice in these situations. But again, I want to make sure that you get that document. You can read thoroughly and make sure it's on there. But it's an awesome program to get new hunters out in the field. So we're super excited about that. You just got to go with a hunter who has obtained those tags. But anyway, we'll walk you through that through this link right now. Now's the big question. So we talked a second ago, we had a question about, hey, when I'm looking through results, when I'm looking through the past, what is more important? A limited tag that might be hard to get, or harvest information to where literally you have the numbers of the animals that have been harvested. So hey, do I want to select a hard to get unit because I think it's better? Do I want to select a unit where I know the harvests have been good? I know that hunters are successful in that unit. Now we're going to talk about the biggest thing that hands down changed my life as a hunter and that I encourage to you, and that is the process of scouting. Scouting is absolutely everything to me as a hunter. And when I say scouting, so many people think scouting and they think I got to go traipse around through the woods. That's part of it. But honestly, scouting is really broken down into building education. Education is everything. And with education, it's not necessarily just about the animal. When we talk about scouting, our scouting process starts off with digital. So we start off literally using mapping software, which there's a lot of it, which we're going to cover in this process here. But literally on your phone, Google Earth, mapping software. I start off with that through the scouting process. I look at units. I look at elevation. When I'm doing the things that we're talking about, that's scouting. Then I'll start looking at access points. When I scout, I'm looking to where I want to know what every trailhead is, what every parking area. Where can I use OHV vehicles? Where can I not? What is everything broken down in my unit? What's private? What's public? I literally want to scout everything digitally before I even step into the field to know what's capable, what's available to me as a hunter. Then through the scouting process, we start looking at things like actually watching the animals, getting out there, learning the daily habits of migration, learning what a food source is, learning what a water source is, learning what bedding zones are, building patterns, timing the weather, timing the thermals. There's so much that goes into scouting. But through the process, both digitally and in the field, all we are trying to do is obtain education to create success. Education, knowing the resource, the land, the animals, the daily migrations, the habits, the travel. Education of that animal creates success. Now, I want to do a little study. So obviously, we have some brand new hunters on here. We have some people that have been hunting for a while. I'm going to break apart and talk about the people who have been hunting. How many of us have spent 5 consecutive days in the field? Again, I know I'm talking to the camera here, but I want to know, how many of you, give me thumbs up, have spent 5 consecutive days in the field? Now, how many of you have gotten that truck, got behind the wheel, driving home unsuccessful? We don't even have to raise our hands. We don't want to admit to it, but I get it, right? How many of us have driven home unsuccessful after 5 days in the field? Now, how many of you have told yourself, I wish I had one more day? How many of you would pay anything to have one more day of hunting? We've all been there. Now, generally speaking, we don't say we want one more day because we just want to get back in the woods that much. Generally speaking, and you tell me if I'm wrong, after spending 5 days in the field, we finally know where the animals are at. We finally found all the sign. You know, we now know where they're at. We found their beds. We built patterns. And all of us wish we had one more day because after hunting 5 days, we finally have a chance. We saw animals. We know where they're at. We know what they're doing. We just need a little bit more time to create that success. How many of you have been there? Again, 5 days straight, unsuccessful. Wish we had one more day because we're finally starting to put it together. Now, if you scout fully, if you scout the way you should, if you scout like you're hunting, again, how many of us, think we're scouting, we don't do much, but then we hunt hard. If you scout as hard as you hunt, very rarely do you need a full season. If you scout hard, build that information, the first or second day of your hunt, you will create that success. You want to know where the animals are at, know their patterns, know what they're doing, know their next move through a flawless scouting mission. And then all of a sudden, when the hunting season actually rolls around, you will create that success because you have the education in hand. You don't want to just randomly hope to find things. You're going to execute a plan, and that's how you create that success. So when I look at a hunting season, right now, tonight, this is a legitimate thing. I want you to think tonight, how many days, how much time, how much of my resources am I going to set aside and dedicate to hunting big game this fall? This is a big step, and I promise you, if you do this, you will be successful this fall. You can absolutely hold me accountable. So right now, how many days, how much time do you have available to set aside to pursue big game in Colorado? I want you to think of that number. Let's just say, for the sake of numbers, that number's 10. I have 10 days to chase big game in Colorado. This is a rule that I put together years ago, back when I used to be a big game guide, and since then it just carries through. I want you, everybody, right now on camera, I want you to dedicate 60% of your available time to scouting and only 40% hunting. Now I say that and so many guys are like, you're crazy. I have 10 days and you're telling me I'm going to waste 6 of them scouting and I'm only going to hunt 4? My season's 7 days long. Why would I only hunt 4 of the 7? But if you scout that 60%, those 6 days or whatever days you're allotted, if you scout 60% of your available time, I promise you, you won't need 40% because you're going to create a successful harvest before those days are even allotted. Because if you spend that 60% time actually scouting hard and dedicating, building education, the first day of that season, before the animals have moved around, before other hunters are changing their patterns, you're going to create that success on that hunt. Scouting is everything. You don't want to have to go out there and just guess. How many times, another question, how many times have you been pursuing an animal, a deer, an elk, any species out there, and it go over the hill? And you're thinking to yourself, should I wait and see if he comes back out tonight, or should I pursue it? How many times do we rush in there? How many times do we pursue it? We go hard, and we get over top of the hill, and we never see that animal again. And we wish to ourselves, man, I sure wish I would have waited. He probably would have came back out tonight, and I could have been successful. Through scouting, you would know, hey, there's a bedding ground over there. I know that animal's going to go over that hill bed. I know tonight he's going to come right back out, and I'm going to create that success. Education leads to good decision making, which helps you create success. Scouting is everything. And with that, we're going to walk you through that process. Obviously, this is the opening night of our Big Game series. Over the next several months, we're going to talk about scouting and where you should be. When we start getting into May, I'm going to give you homework. We're going to say, hey, within the next 2 weeks, I need you to build a plotting map or an idea, a concept of every road, every trail, every parking area. next week, we're going to look at bedding areas. All I want you to do is find bedding areas, and I'm going to help you understand what a bedding area is, where they're at. I'm going to help you locate them. We're going to find water. We're going to find food. I'm going to help you learn the daily migrations of your animals. We're going to walk you through this entire scouting process over the next 4, 5, 6 months. So there's going to be a lot of opportunities. So you don't get overwhelmed tonight. Tonight's the kickoff, just telling you what you need to do. But with setting goals, part of these goals is understanding how much time you can dedicate to scouting. And when I say scouting, like I said, it's digital, it's in field. We're not talking about the average scouting trip. I talked to a buddy of mine, I said, hey, did you scout last year? He said, yeah. I'm like, what's your scouting trip entail? He says, well, you know, we get up into the woods about 8 o'clock, and because we found a great camp, we cut firewood. You know, we got a good start. Finding camp and cutting firewood isn't exactly scouting. I don't want to burst your bubble, but it's not quite there. So when you hunt, when do you leave camp? When do you leave the parking area? And I ask people that, like, oh man, when I hunt, I leave at 3 a.m., I leave at 4 a.m., I'm out there. Like, when you scout, when do you leave? Like, well, we roll in about 7 o'clock. Again, you need to scout as hard as you're going to hunt, and that's ways to create that success. When I'm in the field, I never want to have surprises, and that's one of the big things out there. No surprises. You should know what's over the ridge. How many times have you hiked into an area and you think you're the only soul that's ever been there, and you get over top the hill and there's orange dots, or an ATV comes driving by? Again, we get mad at other hunters. We're constantly like, man, I can't believe there's so many hunters here. Again, it shouldn't be a surprise. You should say, hey, I know there's a trail right here. I know there's a parking lot right here. I know there's going to be hunters here. If you scout, have a plan, no surprises, know all the information, you won't have those odd interactions. You're going to create success and have a great hunt. And it starts tonight. Building plans, building goals. So, how many questions do we have? Everybody know to go pick one of these up. Does everybody know that this process opened March 1st? So again, earlier this week, you can start to apply for tags. Your deadline is coming up right there. Primary draw, April 6th. Now, what time is that? Can everybody read that right there? I know you can't. How many of you last year waited till the last minute, you tried to get on that date at 10 o'clock at night to put in for a tag, and you weren't able to? Years ago, you could apply until midnight of that night. No longer. Your draw has to be in April 6th at 8 p.m. I said it right now, so don't get mad at us on April 6th when you put in at 10 o'clock at night and you can't do it. April 6th at 8 p.m. is when you have to have this in. Again, get this ordered. Grab the purpose plans. Grab this. Let's start looking through it. As you have questions, we're here to help you. You can call our main office. You can call your region office. And one of the things that we're going to talk about here that's big, coming up on March 11th at 7 p.m., we have a webinar. You're going to jump on here. I'll share the link in these comments, so if you have comments, we'll throw it on here. But I want you to sign up for this webinar. We're going to have a webinar literally walking you through step by step, showing the screens, showing what you need on how to apply. So as you have more questions about this, you can comment now and I'll answer those questions. But if you have more questions, we have a webinar, again, on March 11th, 7 p.m., walking you through that exact deadline. Now, one of the big questions that we have, how many of us are superstitious, right? So, right now, I see that it's April 6th. Do you think if I go until April 5th and apply then, like my name's going to be on top of the hat, do you think my odds are better? That's not the case. I promise you, if you apply right now, or you apply on, April 6th at 7 p.m., your odds are the same. Everything is stored, it's all in a computer. Your odds don't go up or down when you apply. So right now, things happen. How many times have computer crashed? How many times have systems get overloaded? Whatever the case may be, don't risk not getting your tags in this year. Don't risk not applying for those license availability here in Colorado. So we're walking you through the plan right now. Do some education this week. But again, right now you have a month. Don't wait until the last minute. Let's apply for these tags sooner than later to make sure that you have it in, you can rest, peace of mind, everything's available right there. So again, everything's online, you can grab this book, it's going to walk you through that process of what you need. But again, everything starts with the goal, understanding the system, understanding what licenses are available, and really take a look at all those GMUs. I think so many hunters get stuck in the concept of, hey, this is just where we hunt. We're successful every couple years. My dad hunted here. There's a lot of availability in Colorado versus of everything, with points, without points, weapon operations or methods of take. A lot of stuff out there to you, the hunter, so think about that. And that's another thing that we're going to kind of close this down with tonight before we jump into a couple more questions, is I think so many of us are sectioned, or we think of ourselves as a specific method of take. How many of you right now, give me a thumbs up, how many of you are specific rifle hunters? How many are muzzleloaders? And how many are archery hunters? Now, how many of you cross over? Me personally, I can tell you right now, I was one of those hunters that I was a die-hard, hardcore archery hunter. That's all I did. If it wasn't with archery equipment, I didn't do it. But now, I look at the availability. So when I'm doing this process right here, I look at what's available. I am a hunter. I don't classify myself as a hunter. I say, hey, you know, this particular unit, I have better odds of drawing this tag with archery equipment. Or I have better options of drawing this license hunting 4th rifle instead of 1st. There's a lot of availability out there, and I encourage hunters, get out of your clamshell. Think about the opportunities that are available. Look at your physical abilities. Again, if it's one of those things that trudging through 2 feet of snow in a late November hunt is too much for you, let's take an earlier season. Or I'm that hunter that, you know, I love hunting the backcountry. Let's think about the availability of those options. Again, so much at stake here. Let's look at the entire process. Get out of your shell. Don't think of yourself as, hey, I can only archery hunt, I can only muzzle, I can only rifle. Let's look at the availability of licensing. Let's look at the availability of units. And let's build the perfect plan, the perfect hunt for you. I'm going to walk you through how to how to basically break down those goals and how to create that success and achieve those goals this hunting season. So we're going to wrap it up tonight. We have a couple more questions for us.
Yeah, how do you think the dates for 3rd rifle will impact the draw odds for mule deer?
So obviously, I think so many of us have anticipated this hunt for a long time. All the seasons. I mean, 1st rifle elk is starting on October 16th, so that's a later hunt than normal, and then obviously they go out from there. As a hunter who, a Colorado native, hunted Colorado my entire life, I can't remember the last time that we've been able to hunt, especially mule deer, this late in the season. I mean, that 4th rifle tag this year, the combined 4th rifle, goes all the way to the very end of November. So if you're talking odds and success, there's no doubt. The mule deer in Colorado rut in late November. We always say it's Thanksgiving, but really the last week of November is when a true rut happens. Now, a lot of us see those big mule deer starting to show signs of rut, you know, I mean, early, even mid-November, but a true rut phase is going to be that last November. So this year's mule deer hunting availability for licensing is the best that we've ever seen it. It just is what it is. So you're going to have a lot of availability of some premier hunts, especially during that 3rd rifle, to where this year, 3rd rifle is where the 4th rifle normally would be. So a lot of options, a lot of availability. I will say this is a hunt that you want to plan for. It's going to be a great hunt, so anytime that we have amazing opportunity at licensing, we want to make sure we capitalize on it. Number 2, if we get the snow that we sometimes get in late November, it can turn into a physical hunt. So right now, think about the training that's going to be in hand. Think about the availability of what roads will be open, what roads will be closed. Let's put a lot of thought into those hunters that are really going to think about hunting the later seasons this year, because they are later than normal. You're going to have more weather than normal. Let's make sure that we're available and physical enough to hunt those. We have the equipment to hunt those. But with that being said, there's going to be a lot of availability for some unbelievable hunts this coming fall.
Can you talk a little bit about options for youth tags that are available?
Absolutely. So youth tags on all aspects, from pronghorn to deer to elk, and everything in between. There's a lot of availability, and I will say this is one of those things you have got to grab this book, read it thoroughly, understand that there's a lot more information available online. The cool thing about some of the youth tags, you're going to apply for a particular GMU. Let's just say you put in for one GMU and it's a 2nd rifle cow tag, just for sake of numbers. A lot of the youth stuff that's available, you're going to apply for that particular unit. In the event of that youth being unsuccessful, those tags will roll to a later hunt. A lot of times they're going to roll to like a December hunt. So much of the youth availability in those licensing right now have options to roll over to a different hunt. So as a youth, whether you're a youth applying for yourself or you're hunting with another hunter, a parent figure, anybody that's setting you up for that, I would really look at the availability of which tags have that rollover effect. Simply for the fact that it increases your odds for success. So, whether it's a timing thing, hey, I don't have enough time to hunt that consecutive in that particular week, now you might have availability of hunting multiple weeks and multiple seasons if unsuccessful in the first one. So, more than anything, there's a lot of availability across the board for big game species and a lot of availability for tags, and I have to say that as somebody who I did not participate in that when I was a youth hunter, and the availability of what's available right now is unbelievable. Colorado Parks and Wildlife has put a major influence on introducing the sport of hunting to youth and making these tags available. And I think it's really cool. And I talked to so many hunters like, man, there's not enough tags available. And I don't think a lot of people realize how the tag system are broken down. And we can talk about that on March 11th, but things like youth and just a lot of the tags and how they're broken down versus herd count, the availability to the hunters out there is incredible, and youth being one of those key features to make sure that they have a hunt of a lifetime. So make sure you check it out. If you have youth, make sure they're aware of that. Make sure that there's availability of those tags, and honestly, seeking out a unit that has that rollover option if unsuccessful is a major thing to check out.
Dustin's been a long-time rifle hunter, but is considering getting out this archery season. Can you talk a little bit about, they're wondering if it's too advanced to attempt archery for the first time this year?
Absolutely. So, talking about rifled archery, it does a lot of things for you. And honestly, there's a lot of perks. Now, obviously, you are eliminating a lot of your range. So, the shooting capabilities, you're going from shooting a long distance to a very short distance. You're going from taking shot and shot placements to really limiting that. So you are adding a lot of hurdles to your hunt. With that being said, number one, a lot of times you're going to have more availability of tags. It is in a lot of areas, not saying all, but in a lot of areas, it is easier to obtain an archery license than it is a rifle. So number one, you're going to have availability of more tags. Number two, you are drastically increasing your hunt by number of days. So where a lot of the rifle hunts, are a short period of time, 5 days, up to 9 days, now all of a sudden you're going to be looking at like a 28-day season. So now all of a sudden you have a lot more time in the field, which obviously is going to help your odds. So that's a major influx. Now when it comes down to one other factor, both mule deer, pronghorn, and elk, you are now the first ones in the field on these animals. So through scouting, you can start now if you wanted to. Scout all spring, all summer. Come fall, you practically, have a relationship with these animals. You know what's happening, and now you're the first one on them. So you're not letting other hunters hunt these animals, educate these animals before you have a chance at them. Now you're the first one there. So that's really cool about the archery hunt. And then you kind of throw it into really seasonal patterns. So a pronghorn and a mule deer, for example. In that early time, for pronghorn August 15th, mule deer September 2nd, these animals are on patterns, hitting water holes, walking the same trails. So those patterns are easy to obtain, and the animals follow them very, very tightly, especially in the warmer weather. So your patterns are easy to build. And number two, on elk, obviously you have the benefit of a rut phase. So when you rifle hunt elk, especially this year where it starts on the 16th, there might not be as much bugling going on. You have to hike, you have to spot and stalk, you have to have a plan to find elk and execute how you're going to get close enough to harvest those. As opposed to archery, you can literally go out in the woods. I'm not saying it's just easy, but you do it right, sometimes it can be. I go out, before light, I let out a cow call or a bugle, and all of a sudden the woods lights up with these animals making noise, and it just makes things so much simpler. Excuse me. To know where these animals are at and what they're doing. So, again, the shooting portion of jumping into archery makes it tougher. All the other things are in your favor as an archery hunter. So, a huge fan of crossing over. And I'll also say, even if you try archery for a year or two, when you go back to rifle or you jump into a rifle tag occasionally, it makes rifle hunting so much easier. I was able to create 18 successful archery elk kills in Colorado. So I did 18 years in a row of harvesting elk here in Colorado. 18 straight, 18 harvests, and it's a lot of work. All of a sudden I picked up a rifle tag not too long ago, and I'm in the woods and I'm kind of trying to sneak up, and I'm like, man, I can just create my harvest from right here. And it makes it better. So learning the aspects of all the availability of methods to take, archery, rifle, muzzleloader, when you kind of dive into all those, you're going to pick up little traits from each. You're going to become a better hunter, and it just makes, harvesting these animals that much easier. So absolutely, huge fan, jump into archery, love it. Alrighty, so guys, we have a couple more questions on here, but a lot of these we're going to follow up with a link. So I see so many comments on here, but I think so many of these more will be explained a little bit by throwing in some links. So we're going to wrap it up, but I promise we're going to monitor this feed. So if you're watching this, obviously we're live right now, but if you're watching this after the fact, feel free, still jump on, comment, make your question, share it. We're going to follow up with all this. We're going to share links to stuff that will help you out. And one of the biggest things, when you see us post an event on this Colorado Parks and Wildlife page, make sure you sign up. So if you see an event going on, like a live feed, make sure you click that notification so you know when we're going live. Because again, right now going forth, we have so much planned. We have a calendar of events from now all the way through the hunts. And I tell you, coming up this fall, we're going to be meeting literally right here with managers and officers that are in these game management units. They're going to be giving tips. Hey, archery pronghorn's coming up. What are we seeing out in the field? All these hunts that we're talking about, we're going to bring you live updates within the week of the start date of that season and tell you the current conditions, tell you what the animals are doing. So I promise you, this is going to be your hub for information for hunting big game in Colorado this entire year. So from now all the way to the last big game season, we're going to bring you information that's going to help you out. You're going to get educated on the animals to create that success, but more so, the legalities and everything that you need to know. How you scout, how you train, the gear you need. What's the best way to select a bow? How do I select a rifle? We're going to walk you through everything, and it's all right here. So stay tuned. We have a lot coming up. Again, I'm your host, Nate Zelinsky. It's coming to you live from Colorado Parks and Wildlife. Everybody stay tuned. We have a lot coming up, and we look forward to seeing you soon.